Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 7th, 2016. Continue to have difficulty with the mute button, which is usually a sign that the microphone is on its way out, though it sounds pretty good. It just, well, I don't think it gave any indication last time except for the mute button, so I suppose prudence dictates that we just go right ahead and order a new microphone and have one standing by in reserve. But it seems like that's I don't know. We have 1 point in our data set. I don't know whether that's to be trusted or not. Anyway, wow. Another crazy day. No idea exactly which direction we will end up going in today. Greg Dworkin having computer problems up in Connecticut, so he won't be available to speak with us today. So twice in a row I've lost out on a standard part of the show. Yesterday we missed Joan McCarter. Thanks to the president. Thanks a whole lot there, Mr. President. But computer problems standing in the way of things today. But we move forward. Bill in Portland, Maine lets us know Daily Kos Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. Announces the speakers at the GOP convention in one word, Trump's. That's all they've got left. Trump, of course, I think everybody can turn to Donald for calm and level-headedness in the face of, hey, wow, another rash of completely nuts police shootings of black men. I don't really know what to say about that one. Of course, we had a little bit of a lull, I guess, for a little while, although certainly the statistics continue to say that there was no real lull. But there was a lull in, I guess, captured on video, completely crazy and I guess impossible to justify shootings going on. And here we have two now back to back. Yesterday we mentioned Alton Sterling having been killed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Today we're on to a new person and a new hashtag. Philando Castile in, if I got it right, St. Anthony's, Minnesota. And Holy mackerel. I don't even know what to tell you about that one. And this one not only came with video, although I don't think, I didn't see any video of the actual shooting, but it was live streamed video from the car once the situation had, of course, gotten out of control and Philando Castile had been shot. His girlfriend, who's driving the car, began streaming video. I don't even have an article yet, although I see several flying by. You know, they're not the first breaking ones or the ones that are on the scene, but they're the usual suspects, I guess. And, I mean, I'll just open the first one I see here is The Hill. I mean, The Hill isn't really the place I would go for this ordinarily, although they have an interesting angle on it. Dem calls for Congress to act after a Minnesota police shooting. So I guess it's rising to that level. And, you know, remember, this is also happening for Congress watchers. This is all happening in the context of continued protests and sit-ins and other objections being raised by Democrats to the failure of Congress to address gun laws in general. Check the KITM hashtag, says Kate Sherrill. She must have supplied me with the latest in the news. Wow, here we are. Thank you very much, Kate, for keeping us up to date. I should have known you would be on top of that one. But you know what? KITM's hashtag is a little full, which is really good news. I mean, people are making more and more use of it. It still moves a lot slower than my regular mentions. So let's see. What have we got here? Jeff Yang writing here. No record, by the way, on Philando Castile. This much I did gather from the Twitter coverage. Man had no record, was licensed to carry the gun that he had, or I guess the gun that will be the excuse for why there was why the police were so worried and afraid and started shooting in the first place. But licensed, registered gun, permitted, the whole 9 yards, all the things that they told people that they ought to do. The NRA said, go out and get yourself a gun. The police can't protect you. Got to take care of yourself these days. But if you do it and you're black, you got trouble. By the way, let me just figure that. Is it St. Anthony? Yeah, St. Anthony, Minnesota is exactly where? Hennepin and Ramsey counties in Minnesota. I want to take a look at the map because my recollection from covering so many various angles on the gun stories is, yeah, there it is. There's Minneapolis. What county? Well, okay, so Minneapolis, Minnesota. Milwaukee is Wisconsin. Yeah, I think I was mixing it up in my head here. Wasn't it the sheriff of Milwaukee's? Is Milwaukee in Milwaukee County? I can't even remember. Anyway, but wasn't it the sheriff in that region who was telling everybody? He's a black guy, the sheriff there, but he was telling everybody, oh yeah, you can't depend on police for protection. Everybody should go out and arm themselves. So I don't know how often anybody's listening to him. Certainly, there'd be no reason in St. Anthony, Minnesota, to worry about what the Milwaukee County sheriff has to say about anything. But certainly the NRA had to bear on this guy, and he went through all the things he was supposed to do. He went ahead and got permitted and took care of himself, and no indication of putting up any kind of trouble. They were stopped apparently for a broken tail light. Wink, wink. I mean, I guess they might have even had a broken taillight, and whatever. And they, I really need to get a hold of some of the articles here. I'm scrolling down, Kate. I got two screens going here. Let's see. But yeah, he tells the here's a New York Times piece on that. Thank you, Kate. Tells the officers that he's armed. Everything you're supposed to do. I am armed. I am going to get my license and registration as you ask, but you know how it is with both guns and licenses and registration. They very often in the same place. That was the point of my telling you, yes, I have a gun and now I have to go and get the license and registration you asked for. But I guess that was just too terrifying for the police. And guess what? Another ridiculous shooting. Let's see here. The coverage from the New York Times. Jonah Engel Bromwich is the writer here. I have to see what we can come up with from on the scene in Minnesota. But a Minnesota man fatally shot last night, by police during a traffic stop in a St. Paul suburb. And the aftermath was captured in a grisly video recorded by the car's front seat passenger and streamed live. I guess maybe she was the passenger at the time and then switched over because she was in the driver's seat when I saw the video. Second shooting of the week of a black man by police officers, and parts of both encounters recorded on video. As the Minnesota video circulated widely on social media, protesters gathered outside the governor's mansion in St. Paul early Thursday demanding accountability for the police officers involved. On Thursday morning, Representative Betty McCollum, a Minnesota Democrat, called for the Justice Department to investigate the shooting. They're already in on a investigation of the Baton Rouge shooting. The video begins after the shooting occurred, and shows the man slumped, bloody, against the woman who was recording it. Her young daughter sat in the back seat. The footage was extraordinary in that the woman began by calmly narrating what was happening as she trained the camera on the man, whom she described as her boyfriend, on at least one officer who was pointing a gun through the driver's side window. "Please, officer, don't tell me that you just did this to him," she said. "You shot 4 bullets into him, sir. He was getting his license and registration, sir." The woman's daughter, who was in the back seat, appears several times in the video. Near the end of the 10-minute clip, as the two are sitting in the back of a police car, she comforts her mother, saying, "It's okay, Mommy, it's okay, I'm right here with you." Falls to the children on this one. The video streamed live on a private Facebook account belonging to Lavish Reynolds, and the clip passed rapidly among Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube users, becoming significant news online before traditional outlets, even those in the Minneapolis area, caught up. The police confirmed the shooting but did not release the names of the man or the officers involved. Beware of course, false names being released by the trolls we learned about yesterday. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune reported that the man killed was Philando Castile, a 32-year-old cafeteria supervisor at a Montessori school in St. Paul. Well, kids, someone else will be making your lunch today, and I don't know how exactly they will explain that one to you. Family members demanded justice for Mr. Castile during an interview on CNN early Thursday. Mr. Castile's uncle, Clarence Castile, I'm surprised it's already on CNN, given that if the guy had no record, where are they going to get a photo of the guy? By the way, after a long search and the circulation of many very pleasant, everyday, happy, smiling photos of Alton Sterling, the CNN finally did come up with a mugshot and was able to put a picture of Mr. Sterling on the air. Thanks for waiting. Mr. Castile's uncle, Clarence Castile, said police officers who were meant to protect Americans had instead become our executioners and judges and murderers. When he watched the video, he said, "I saw a young man shot, helpless, shot for no apparent reason. I saw my nephew shot by a man clinging to his life with no help. It was the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life." Mr. Castile's mother, Valerie Castile, said she had taught her son to be extremely cautious when encountering members of law enforcement. "If you get stopped by the police, comply," Ms. Castile said. Comply, comply, comply. In other words, by the way, all the advice given by Blue Lives Matter to those interested in the movement behind Black Lives Matter. Comply with the police and you won't be shot. Arm yourself and you won't fall subject to tyranny. It's not working out. It's really not. "My son-in-law was a law-abiding citizen and he did nothing wrong," she said. "He's no thug." She added, "I think he was just black in the wrong place." And she doesn't mean his face, but that too, I guess. All right. Oh, this is interesting. I don't know where this comes from, but on Twitter I find the cop who killed Philando Castile says the cop who killed Philando Castile is Asian, so watch him go down like Peter Lang in New York. The thin blue line doesn't extend to persons of color cops. Very interesting. Maybe. Let's see. Any other news breaking? And I'll refer you to the New York Times piece for. Well, let's continue. I think it actually does finally go into a description of the situation there. By the way, let me just stop for a second as an aside and answer a Twitter query from Mary Mendonca, who tweets as, what is this? I'm sorry, here we go. War Eagle Bio, oh my goodness. W-A-R, War, Eagle, E-A-G-L-E, B-I-O-L. Not certain what that means. But anyway, Mary frets that the live stream, the link to my show, says the server is not available, same as yesterday. I am not sure what's going on there, but I don't think I've heard anybody else make that complaint. So I don't know how I would get the message out to those of you. If you weren't hearing the show, I would ask you to. Yeah, see, that's not really going to work. Seems to be working everywhere else, though. Anyway, wondered if any of you had any difficulty with the live stream and had then listened on podcast. But Kate Sherrill, who is listening live, of course, has checked in fine with us here. Josh Warren says everything's good in Boston. I I don't know what to say. Maybe try refreshing the page. Have you tried turning it off and then turning it back on again? Does anyone want to go over to Mary's house? And does Mary give her location? No, she doesn't. But I could send one of you over there with a smartphone. All right. Well, let's see. Well, with that out of the way, I guess. Oh, and here's a comment about the current story. Athena 5000 says, I love your show, but I want to tell you this happens every day. I thank God for the internet and video capabilities. Yeah, no doubt that the shootings happen every day. What's happening that's new is the combination of, one, capturing it on video, and two, having it be so obviously a murder. I mean, there's plenty of police shootings captured on video, probably, but they don't come out as clean. You know what I mean? It's very often doubtful about the danger, but at least some element is there captured on video that helps the police tamp down, at least on the outrage. And of course, there's probably some videos where the outrage would be very much deserved, but for some reason they don't go viral. It's a pretty random thing, no doubt about it. But I mean, as I said in the discussion of it earlier, there's no doubt but that these things happen every day. Statistically, we know this. There can't be the number of police shootings of all people, but in particular of black people that we have without them actually happening every day, or at least nearly every day. So there's no doubt about that. It's just there was a lull for a while. I mean, I think is largely true. There was a lull for a while in shootings captured on video that generated this kind of outrage. For whatever reason, outrage is generated. When it happens, and we mark these things in time, and it has been a while. Let's go to the continuing coverage from the New York Times of the activity captured in the video, just so we all get some kind of sense of what happened here. The shooting occurred around 9 p.m. in Falcon Heights, a town about, it says 5,500 north of St. Paul. 5,500 what? North of St. Paul? It's an interesting measure to you. 5,500. What could it possibly be? Meters, inches, feet? It hovers 5,500 nanometers above. What? That's all right. So a little mistake in the editing there. When an officer with the St. Anthony Police Department, which is contracted to handle law enforcement in Falcon Heights, therefore the confusion on my part, pulled over a car being driven by Mr. Castile. Actually, I do run into this a lot in the gun stories. Confusions between whether something happened in a borough or a township somewhere, and sometimes the police from a neighboring jurisdiction being contracted. It's a very odd situation, but I imagine it happens more often than we realize, just like shooting people. The officer involved has been put on leave, and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, another interesting name, has been called in to investigate, said John Mangseth, the interim chief of police in St. Anthony. In the video, the woman says that after being pulled over for a broken taillight, her boyfriend was shot several times while reaching for his license. We have seen this before, of course. She says that he had told officers before the shooting that he had a gun in the car. In the background, one of the officers can be heard shouting, "I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get his hands up." That would be interesting if it was just merely a miscommunication as between the officers. One says, "Don't get your license." The other says, "Do get your license." What do you do? The video begins with images of the man, who appears to be moaning and moving slightly, his left arm and left side bloody. The woman then pans the camera to her face and says matter-of-factly, "They killed my boyfriend." By the way, I think there's actually been some commentary online that somehow her calm demeanor was out of place and made her somehow suspect in all of this. But Yeah. I think probably a better explanation, also made available on Twitter, somebody saying, yeah, that's called survival mode. This is what you learn to do when they're killing people that look like you all over the place for no reason, and they all have guns out and trained on you. Certainly not a universal reaction, but probably the best one you can come up with in the moment. Look at minus filming the thing. That would be the best one you could come up with, I guess. So well done here. Looking into the camera, she says the man had told officers that he was carrying a weapon. She says he was licensed to do so, and that he was reaching for his wallet when he was shot. And the officer just shot him in the arm, she says, adding, she just shot his arm off. When the officer tells the woman to keep her hands on the wheels, she replies, I will, sir. No worries, I will. Moments later, her voice shaking, the woman says, oh my God, please don't tell me he's gone. Please don't tell me my boyfriend just went like that. Then, please, Jesus, don't tell me that he's gone. Please, officer, Jesus, everybody, don't tell me that you just did this to him. An officer issues an order to get the female passenger out. Exit now, she is told, and keep them up. She asks for her daughter. The video was briefly removed from Facebook, but later restored with a graphic warning attached. The warning that it was a graphic video attached. If you attach a graphic warning to it, that's defeating the purpose. Don't do that. They need some editors at the New York Times. At one point, the video goes dark as the woman moves from the car to a police vehicle, although it continues to capture an audio feed as the woman prays for the man's life. Chief Mangseth, who said the woman had been taken to the police department to be interviewed. The Falcon Heights shooting occurred the same day that the Justice Department opened a civil rights investigation into the fatal shooting on Tuesday of a black man, you know who he is, Alden Sterling, by the Baton Rouge, Louisiana police. As in the Minnesota case, the encounter was captured in a searing video that was aired repeatedly on television and social media and reignited contentious issues surrounding police killings of African Americans. The man shot in Louisiana, Alton B. Sterling, 37 years old, killed early Tuesday as two white police officers responded to a call about an armed man. The officers had Mr. Sterling pinned to the ground when at least one of them shot him. The video of the shooting propelled the case to national attention, like a string of recorded police shootings before it, and the lull that came after it. The shooting has prompted protests in Baton Rouge, the capital of Louisiana, and a prayer vigil on Wednesday. Officials identified the officers, and I guess this is for real, as Blaine Salamoni, Salamoni, and Howie Lake II. Both were placed on administrative leave. After the Minnesota shooting, the terms Falcon Heights shooting and Philando Castile were trending on Twitter as news of the encounter spread. By early Thursday, scores of protesters had streamed to the governor's mansion in St. Paul demanding action from Governor Mark Dayton. Videos posted on Twitter showed people shouting, "Wake up!" and "No justice, no peace, prosecute the police." A nice addition there. It was unclear whether Mr. Dayton was inside the residence. A message left with the governor's spokesman was not immediately returned. Steve Linders, a spokesman for the St. Paul police, said the crowd had dwindled to about 20 or so protesters by shortly after sunrise. All right. And a correction. An earlier version of this article incorrectly described the beginning of the video shot in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. It shows the aftermath of the shooting. It doesn't show the shooting itself. That was pretty clear, and I guess since we read the corrected version, we didn't really need to add that, but just for the record. Let's see. I was sort of forced to go back to some earlier thoughts and materials on this subject today, of course, since the subject is renewed and refreshed in our minds. Just keeping in mind, everyone should remember, and if you need a refresher, YouTube will help you. Compare these two videos and all the videos that came before it of these police shootings to the demeanor of the police in encountering YouTube open carry demonstrators. And in most cases, the bowing and scraping of the police and the assurances that we're on your side and how are we doing today, sir? They approach a white guy with a gun with, how are we doing today, sir? Hey, what's going on here today, sir? They're suspicious of him, of course, and they never really treat him all that well. But consider how frequently these open carry protesters, these YouTubers, insist this is tyranny. This is the tyranny we're talking about, why we have to fight the government. Because everyone knows that it's against the law now for these police to ask me if I have a permit, and yet they did it. So that's tyranny versus, hey, you have a tail light out. Okay, I just need to tell you I have a gun. Give me your license and registration. Okay, I'm going to get it. But remember, I have a gun. I don't want you to freak out if you see it or freak out if you find it later. I want you to know I am armed and you're telling me I need to go into my pocket. I'm going to do that now. And then shoot him and kill him. But, that's not tyranny. He should have obeyed the police. He did it as well as anybody possibly could. So, wow, that's where we now stand. So that's the news of the day nationally. Putting this all in some context in terms of my disjointed thoughts on all of this stuff, I'll give you some news and context on that. Special alert to our friend in Hawaii, Judy Vincent, our scouting, fellow scouting enthusiast, I guess we could say. We were up pre-dawn in the house today, and everybody else is home, working from home, so we got a little bit of noise in the background. You're going to hear a little bit of that today. It's okay. Don't panic. Here's why. We were up pre-dawn. Eldest son, scout number 1, on his way, probably about now if everything's working at the airport, to Northern Tier for an exciting high-adventure vacation, canoeing in the boundary waters of northern Minnesota, where all part of our bad news for today comes from, although not that far north. Boundary waters between northern Minnesota and southwestern Ontario, paddling around in teeny tiny little canoes for 10 days with nothing but the clothes on your back, pretty much. So lots of prep going into that. Yesterday was a somewhat disjointed and dizzying show, at least from my perspective, just because, I don't know, I was in packing mode for this thing. And when we say packing, holy cow, I mean, not much going, but you really have to go over every ounce that you're giving these guys to carry and justify it as worth the effort. And the thing that strikes me most about this Northern Tier adventure, 2 pairs of clothing for 10 days. One wet one and one dry one. You paddle all day in the wet clothes, get to camp, take them off, hang them up to dry, put on your dry clothes, sleep in them, take off the dry clothes, pack them up in plastic bags again, and then put on the wet ones that may be dried and maybe not, and go paddling again. Sounds like a terrible way to spend a vacation if you're an adult. Fantastic if you're a kid, but we'll see how the chafing goes, and we'll give you a report in a couple of days. Now back to national news, but you know what would be a great thing to do here? Yesterday, of course, we missed out on having Joan McCarter with us, and I should have thought on the fly about the fact that I have a Michigan update from Rosalind McGregor at the ready, but I had programmed in my mind, well, I don't have time for it tomorrow because I'll have Greg, and in a few minutes, and then we'll have Joan, and I don't know where I would shoehorn Rosalind's update in. But once we found out Joan wasn't coming, I had all the time in the world. But, my head was in the clouds yesterday, and there was lots to go over, and I was fascinated by the weirdo trolls that came out on the Alton Sterling thing. Haven't seen them out here yet today. But with any luck, we've inoculated against the circulation of false rumors about what the names of the cops in Falcon Heights might be. But now would be a good time to pull out the Rosalind McGregor update and mute the microphone for just a few minutes. So, Rosalind, please take it away.
Good morning, David. I have an article from Bridge Magazine that I thought worth sharing with your listeners. The title sets things up. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where cash-poor cities work together with state emergency managers. If you want to understand the problem with Michigan's emergency manager law, Pittsburgh is a good place to start. More than 200 miles east of the Michigan border, Pittsburgh is a Rust Belt, financially distressed city of its own, dealing with population loss and economic upheaval like many of Michigan's cash-poor communities. It has been under Pennsylvania's version of state control for more than a decade. That's where the similarities end. Pittsburgh's leaders get along with the state's management team. Budget decisions are made in partnership with locally elected officials, not solely by someone appointed by the governor. The city's financially distressed status gives it the ability to raise local taxes and puts it at the top of the list for state grants for economic development, all things that make a Flint disaster unlikely to happen in Pennsylvania, according to city and state leaders in the Keystone State. Michigan's emergency manager law encourages quick decisions, and I think that's its institutional problem there with the law, said John Fournier, Deputy Chief of Staff to Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto. Before moving to Pittsburgh, Fournier worked as a speechwriter in the administration of former Governor Jennifer Granholm. As terrible as what happened in Flint, I think it's also not entirely surprising that eventually the emergency manager law would have produced a result like that. Cities across Michigan are facing a financial crisis, largely as a result of the accumulation of state policy decisions over the last 40 years that make it difficult for cities to pay for even basic services. Pennsylvania, like Michigan, was hit hard by a changing economy, but the two states take radically different approaches to helping their cash-poor communities. In simplest terms, Michigan's policy involves a state-appointed emergency manager taking complete control of a municipality, generally cutting costs deeply and quickly to balance the budget. The solution is always cuts, says Josh Sapochin, Michigan State University assistant professor of political science, who was part of a team of researchers who looked at municipal finance constraints at a state-by-state level. You cut because it's the easiest fix, he said. You probably restructure some contracts and cut police. That's not the recipe for a sustainable future for cities like Flint or Benton Harbor or Highland Park. There's potential for the death spiral. As services decline, people move or are less likely to pay taxes, making city revenues drop more. Financially distressed cities in Pennsylvania often face cuts, but because the state also gives these cities tools to raise revenue, the cuts are typically not as severe as in Michigan. For example, in 2003, when Pittsburgh fell into Pennsylvania's Distressed Cities program called Act 47, the police force was cut by 16%, a cut they described as draconian. But that's less of a cut than even the average Michigan city experienced between 2005 and 2014. Flint, under emergency management twice since 2002, lost 58% of its police force to save money, despite being one of the nation's most violent cities. Even with a trimmed police force, Pittsburgh has 3 officers for every 1,000 residents. Flint has 1 cop per 1,000. The average in Michigan cities is 1.6 police officers per 1,000 residents. You can't just look at the numbers and make your cuts and balance the budget, Fred Redding said. You need to look at a strategy that will provide long-term sustainability. To do that, you need to look at things from a holistic standpoint. In Pennsylvania, that means giving financially distressed cities the ability to raise more revenue through taxes, such as income taxes on those who work in the city but live outside city limits. It also means bumping distressed cities to the front of the line for grants from the state, such as from the Departments of Transportation, Environmental Protection, and Community and Economic Development. The key to long-term improvement for cities isn't cutting budgets, Redding said, though that may not be necessary in the short term. The key is increasing revenue. You need a strategy that takes into account the assets a community has and builds on that, Redding said. In Pittsburgh, that's meant a transition from the steel industry to a diversified economy built around the city's major universities and medicine. The riverfronts, once dominated by sooty factories, are now greenways. Quote, the reality is Pittsburgh is a city of 700,000 at its peak, and when you lose more than half of that population, you're going to have financial problems, Fournier said. That legacy caught up to us to the point you couldn't pave the streets, we couldn't maintain buildings, our financial problems were sprawled across the newspaper all the time. Today what people would notice is that the facilities we have are better cared for, our rec centers are in better shape, we're hiring more police officers, Fournier said. Overall, the quality of city services is improving. The city's debt service, which had averaged around $90 million, will sink to $40 million by 2018, Pittsburgh Finance Director Paul Leager said. Economic development spurred by coordination between the city and state has helped revitalize the city. You see a city that is viable instead of one that was dying or abandoned, Leager said. You walk around downtown and you don't notice decay like you do in other cities in financial trouble. Another key to the Pennsylvania program, a long-term, more collaborative relationship between the city and the state. Unlike Michigan cities under emergency management, Pittsburgh leaders still have a voice in their city. Budgets are created by the city and then approved by the state's Act 47 team. By contrast, in Michigan, a state-appointed emergency manager makes all the budget calls. Quote, Act 47 allows local officials to take a first pass and even a second pass at budgeting and management decisions, Fournier said. We're more than 10 years into this process, and there's a broad understanding in city leadership as to what direction we need to be headed in. Pittsburgh Finance Director Leager recommended Michigan loosen the rules on how cities can raise revenue so communities can have more say in their own budgets. Pittsburgh Deputy Chief of Staff Fournier said Michigan needs to think more about long-term solutions for its cash-poor cities instead of searching for quick fixes. Quote, it's not about silver bullets, Fournier said. Private businesses might be able to find gimmicks to turn things around at the drop of a hat, but government can't. Quote, you have to think about what your city is going to look like in 10 or 20 years, Fournier said, and I don't think the Michigan Emergency Financial Manager Law is designed to think like that. It's designed to come into a crisis and make a bunch of changes all at once. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but managing a city budget is more about slow and steady, not acting like corporate restructuring specialists. That's it for this installment from the Kagro in the Morning Michigan correspondent, Rosalind McGregor signing out. Back to you, David.
I like the outro. Thanks very much, Rosalind, and for identifying yourself, doing all the hard work that I'm supposed to be doing, but frequently forget to do. Like covering Michigan. And who knew that you could implement emergency management laws and have a good outcome? It's almost as though the states were intended to be some sorts of, like a laboratory in which you could experiment with various aspects of democracy. Somebody ought to write that down and give it a try. It's weird because the only thing that they tend to reproduce from state to state are things like let's drug test welfare recipients and see if we can find like 4 in the state that might have used some drugs sometime in the last 90 days or so. And spend untold millions, I guess, on these tests, only to see if we might be able to perhaps revoke a couple $100 a month worth of benefits. Yeah, it's weird how that works. Anyway, thanks for bringing that one to our attention. And if only there were some way for people in Michigan to have read about this as Rosalind did, even though she's in Michigan. So I guess it's definitely possible. It's weird that she got wind of that. And, golly, I guess none of the lawmakers in town were able to find this thing. But maybe they'll find it where she read it and wake up. That would be really, really funny. Hope they get around to that one. Okay. Let's see. Other interesting tidbits that we should toss into the mix here to get back to our main themes of the day and see if we can even get to the other big stories of the day. Maybe we ought to skip the details and get on to the other things because there's so much going on. I mentioned to you that... or did I mention to you? See, yes, I know I mentioned Trump in the beginning of the show, just thinking, wow, it's going to be just so great listening to Donald Trump calm everybody's nerves over 2 back-to-back crazy shootings. Of course, that's not going to happen. It's going to get worse. But it reminded me that I saw reporting yesterday, this one from the Washington Post's Jenna Johnson, covering the Trump rally near Cincinnati, noting, for instance, that the one of the warm-up speakers, not identified in this tweet, at the Trump rally asks the crowd if they would walk down a sidewalk in D.C. or Baltimore on a weekend. And the implication, of course, being where black people are. And the crowd, screamed back, no, like, no way. This was in, where Sharonville, was that the name of the town? Which is a suburb of Cincinnati. And I guess, I don't know exactly what the demographics are all about. But anyway, many people from the area saying, yeah, those guys would be afraid to walk in downtown Cincinnati, too. But it really illustrated something that's at the heart of Trumpism and Trump fandom. These people are very, very frightened of everything. I mean, mind you, that they keep telling us that they're going to battle the government with their mail-order AR-15s, and we're going to stand up against tyranny, plus we're going to defeat ISIS, and and this and that and the other thing. But afraid to walk in a downtown area. And I mean, there are places in downtown areas where you should be on your guard, certainly. But I mean, what kind of question is that? And would you walk down a sidewalk anywhere in D.C. or Baltimore? Yeah, you bet. Are there sidewalks I wouldn't want to walk down in D.C. or Baltimore? Well, yeah, there are some, but largely because I've walked down them before and said, this isn't the greatest place in the world to be. And in the dark, it's certainly a different issue than it is during the day, and there's there's mitigating circumstances for everything, but really all of DC and Baltimore are out of the question. But you may think I'm exaggerating, but I really do think that there's a huge fantasy life / fear factor that goes on among these folks. There really are, absolutely, definitely people who flatly refuse, whenever practicable anyway, to go to D.C., Baltimore, or New York City. New York City? I mean, we do have lots of gun fails stories about people who, for whatever reason, go anyway to New York and bring their guns with them from Georgia, from Alabama, what have you. And they're outraged when they get caught. Why is it I can't bring my gun with me? And the subtext of the story always ends up being, well, why did you bring your gun with you? And they just say the answer is just New York. Everybody knows that people are getting murdered left and right in New York. They really do have this. I mean, there's more to the two Americas thing than what John Edwards had to say about it. If you care what John Edwards had to say about anything anymore. But there are two Americas, and they are, well, they're probably both afraid of one another. One a little bit more justifiably than the other. It's one America keeps shooting the other America, but the first America is deathly afraid of the second America, even though the second America's Americans keep getting shot. They're afraid too, but apparently nobody cares. I don't really know how this works, but I'm just noting it for the record. I think we all really do know how it works. There have been other gun stories happening because those things never cease. I will simply note quickly for the record, I had a story passed on to me this morning. Another 3-year-old has found a gun and shot and killed herself with it. And so, newsflash, 3-year-olds can, in fact, pull triggers. I have described to you how it can happen and how it does happen. This one in Southern California, Lemoore, California. Reported in the Fresno Bee. I don't believe I've got a name on this child at this point, but I note this for our records. It is the 54th child under the age of 15 accidentally shot to death, according to my records, this year. And it's a hot start to July, ladies and gentlemen. The 4th child under 15 years old accidentally shot to death in the first 3 days of July. We started out the year very hot and fast, slowed down a little bit through May, thankfully, and then we were back on traditional pace. But what a hot start to July, and that wouldn't even include anybody who might have been hit accidentally by celebratory gunfire. I don't think we had any deaths from that this year, thankfully. but only up through the 3rd. We had a Clarksville, Tennessee 3-year-old on the 1st of July. 2 kids accidentally shot to death on the 3rd of July. One in Lomansville, Kentucky, a 7-year-old shot by his 8-year-old sibling. Then Stephen Brumby accidentally shot to death by his dad at the practice range, 14 years old, Sarasota, Florida. In between, on the 2nd, we found out about this Livermore, California 3-year-old. So that continues apace, just so you know where we're at with our numbers on that one. Also, another entry from Edmond, Oklahoma, in the continuing epidemic of gun range suicides. Noteworthy mostly because of the fact that it happened at the Safety First gun range. A little ironic, but I don't think we really need to add irony to suicide to get a story out of it, but just worth noting, I guess. Also on the gun front, a story shared via Twitter, I believe, by one of the listeners, and there's no place to note in Pocket who sent it to me. They really need to help me out and let me have that one. You know what? Greg sent it to me. That's it. He let me know yesterday, even before he knew he wasn't going to be on the show. He let me know that this was worth it. Oh, and in fact, he also sent me a couple of things. Yeah, now I know what I can do with the rest of the show. But let's see if we can get all of our news in. The Texas Tribune tells us that 3 University of Texas professors are suing to block the new campus carry law. You're going to have to hurry up and get to it because I believe that is scheduled to go into effect on August 1st in time for the new academic year. 3 University of Texas at Austin professors sued their university and the state on Wednesday, claiming Texas's new campus carry law is forcing the school to impose overly solicitous, dangerously experimental gun policies that violate the First and Second Amendments. How interesting. The professors, Jennifer Lynn Glass, they're going to be targeted. Well, anyway, Lisa Moore and Mia Carter are asking a federal judge to grant an injunction that would block the law before it goes into effect on August 1st. In the suit, professors say they teach courses that touch emotional issues like gay rights and abortion. The possibility of guns on campus could stifle class discussion, which is a violation of the First Amendment, the suit says. Compelling professors at a public university to allow, without any limitation or restriction, students to carry concealed guns in their classrooms chills the First Amendment rights to academic freedom, the lawsuit says. I've heard it argued before. It's worth airing it, certainly. I don't know whether it's worth airing it in Texas, but there you have it. The suit also cites the Second Amendment, which usually is cited by gun rights supporters to bolster their ideas like campus carry. The Second Amendment is not a one-way street, the suit says. It starts with the proposition that a well-regulated militia, well-regulated, emphasis added, is necessary to the security of a free state. The Supreme Court has explained that well-regulated means imposition of proper discipline and training. The suit adds, if the state is to force them to admit guns into their classrooms, then the officials responsible for the compulsory policy must establish that there is a substantial reason for the policy and that their regulation of the concealed carrying of handguns on college campuses is well regulated. Current facts indicate they cannot do so. The professors also claim that the law violates the 14th Amendment. Get all the amendments in there, which promises equal protection under the law. The lawsuit is likely to be a long shot. Numerous states across the country have passed similar campus carry laws that haven't been overturned. The state's campus carry law was approved last year. Starting August 1st, public universities will be required to allow concealed handgun license holders to carry their weapons inside most buildings and classrooms, though some limited restrictions apply. And we've talked about what those restrictions are and how they came to deciding in favor of such widespread allowance of concealed carry, including in the classrooms. And for starters, I guess without more data, I can't really, on a purely analytical level, tell you that they're wrong about that. I do think that they have a point that it is the transfer of weapons from holster to locker, locker to holster, that accounts for an awful lot of accidents, and you're just probably going to see a lot more of that if you ask concealed carriers to disarm or empty their chambers of bullets on their way into the buildings, you'll see accidents there. That's likely true. So if you're forced to accept them on campus at all, having them transfer the gun out of their possession or render it safe before entering a classroom is probably going to be counterproductive. Very sad, but it's true. Okay, well, interesting. We'll see how the lawsuit fares on that. I don't hold out a lot of hope for that one. Okay, the second thing that Greg sent me yesterday, a little bit more up our political and congressional alley. Matt Fuller covers this one for the Huffington Post, and he's one of the few, reporters on the job in Congress that actually gets this procedural stuff. So it's always a pleasure to see him writing about it. Greg basically sent me this along with a note that says, I don't know what this means. It's full of jargon, but I can tell there's something here. Could you read it and interpret it? Yes, we can. The Huffington Post reports Paul Ryan has a House Freedom Caucus problem. In the immortal words of Dave Weigel yesterday, why is this news? This has already been reported that he has got a House Freedom Caucus problem. But guess what? It's news nonetheless. Conservatives, it says, are prepared to derail the appropriations process if they don't get their way. That also not really news, but here's where it enters the realm of news. When Paul Ryan took the Speaker's gavel in October, he wanted things to be different. That is true, but also not news. Former Speaker John Boehner had just resigned from Congress. True, not news. Over the threat of a conservative mutiny. True, not news. All right. I'm sorry, it's good stuff. And Ryan, who never really wanted the speakership, which really would be news if it was true, made it clear he'd only take the job if he had the overwhelming support of the GOP conference, the House Freedom Caucus included. While the HFC never gave Ryan an official endorsement, which rings funny. There's a good wink-wink there from Matt Fuller in the endorsement game with Paul Ryan. 27 out of 39 members in the group supported the Wisconsin Republicans' bid for Speaker, partly because Ryan said he wanted, remember what he wanted to do? To open up the legislative process. Remember, we're going to have regular order and an open legislative process. Now, before I even go on, I'm already on sidetrack. I'll read you this paragraph. Not 9 months later, however, with Ryan clamping down on the appropriations process to handpick which amendments get votes on the House floor, that promise isn't looking so intact, and the Freedom Caucus has noticed. If only somebody could have told you that there was no way in hell he would ever be able to deliver on that promise. How do we know this? 2 ways. If you don't know anything about anything, you would know it already because you're awake and aware and a student of history, or at least current events, and you would have read within living memory the promises of John Boehner upon assuming the speakership and saying, well, I'm going to open up the process and we're going to have regular order around here. Or you might have seen Mitch McConnell do the same thing in the Senate, or promise the same thing in the Senate. Or the other way is you could have heard me tell you, of course there's no way he's going to be able to do it. That it doesn't actually work that way. The rest of the House of Representatives knows very well what you can do with the rules and the amendments. And when you get a must-pass bill to the floor, like an appropriations bill, it's a magnet for Christmas tree amendments. So, hang anything you can on a must-pass bill. And that's always been the issue. Now, appropriations bills are supposed to be protected by rule from extraneous legislating, and they are. You technically you usually have to put together a waiver of some kind. Certainly on the Senate side, you'll see it waived on the floor, where it's more about doing. Well, those waivers are asked for and granted on the floor by the body, whereas very often waivers for such things are granted not behind closed doors per se, but in a rules committee where fewer people are watching. But it does happen all the time. And but very quickly, the more open you leave the process, the more open it is to mischief. And whoever is in the minority, they love to use the opportunity to offer amendments to cause trouble and to troll the other side and to force them to take tough votes. There's very rarely any question of the minority's proposal passing, because it is, after all, the minority, and it will be a matter of pride for the majority to make sure that the minority doesn't get away with it. Occasionally, they'll let something through, but only very, very rarely. What instead is happening is, of course, is you're forcing members of the majority to vote down a proposal that on its surface is inherently reasonable, and then you beat them up in the election for it in the campaign and say they voted against this inherently reasonable proposal. They did so because it was considered a poison pill to them, or some part of it was, or whatever. But that's the game that gets played. And as soon as you realize that that game is going to be played, which is immediately if you're Paul Ryan, because when he was in the minority, he did play this game, and with great relish, it takes no, insight whatsoever to realize, yes, very quickly they're going to regret that, and they'll change it, and they'll say, oh, it's just for this thing, and it's just because this thing has to pass, or else there's a government shutdown, and then they'll get more and more and more comfortable with it. That's the way of these things. So, where are we in particular right here, right now, with the Freedom Caucus and Ryan and these appropriations bills? The situation, Matt Fuller tells us, came to a head on the House floor Tuesday night. HFC, House Freedom Caucus, what a descriptive term. House Freedom Caucus members told Ryan they were prepared to take down a rule, a party line procedural vote that allows a bill to come to the floor, about rules in the House, over GOP leadership not allowing votes on certain Republican amendments. Remember, we're going to have an open process, regular order. The appropriations bills will be open to amendment by anybody. But guess what? First, out of fear that Democrats, those nasty, nasty Democrats, would do something like, say, let's have votes on guns as an amendment in some fashion. Guns will enter into the picture on appropriations. That'll make things tough for Republicans. They won't want to do it. So we'll just ban those kinds of amendments. But guess what? Of course, Republicans can't resist the temptation to try and hang some ridiculous, let's say, abortion or voter ID or more guns on campus for everybody type of amendment on something like this. And those are annoying too. And guess what? The Speaker didn't want to bother with it. So House Freedom Caucus members said, we're not going to get our way on our ridiculous extraneous amendments. Well, maybe we'll vote no on the rule. So what happened? In this particular case, it was two proposals from conservative Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, dealing with stuff in Kentucky, right? No, of course not. Stuff in Washington, D.C., because they play all sorts of funky little games with it. Just like the UT professors were saying, let's not have any stupid gun experiments run first among our kids on college campuses. And there may be no way to stop that. Thomas Massie says, let's run our stupid gun social policy experiment on D.C., where they don't have a voting member in Congress, and we can, who cares? If it goes to hell, who loses their seat? Nobody. And if anybody, it's the non-voting member from D.C. who's a Democrat anyway. So let's try it. Both of the proposals, I don't even know exactly what they do, but they deal with D.C. gun laws, were blocked from consideration on a financial services appropriations bill, which tells you a little something about the amount of care that Thomas Massie put into selecting his vehicle. I have two stupid things I'd like to do to D.C. gun laws. Where can financial services appropriations, the perfect place. All right, so let's hear from the House Freedom Caucus. Representative Raul Labrador, Republican of Idaho, who Joan frequently tells us about his being a jerk. It says, the rule was going down. He told the Huffington Post late Tuesday night he often speaks for the House Freedom Caucus. Ryan and other members of the GOP leadership circled up with about 20 members of the Freedom Caucus during the evening vote series and assured conservatives they would discuss the new process for appropriations bills coming to the floor, according to members present. Ryan recently announced that spending bills would now come to the floor under what's known as a structured rule, i.e. the same damn thing that they always use for appropriations bills the minute they realize that the open process is a suicide pact, meaning leaders decide which amendments get votes. So super duper democratic. Boehner was generally able to bring appropriations bills to the floor under an open rule, meaning any member could offer an amendment and get a vote. The Freedom Caucus went along with Ryan's plan and even offered support for it because the speaker told members it was a necessary shift in order to prevent Democrats from offering contentious amendments that Ryan contended were designed to take down spending bills. Now, with Republican leaders blocking Republican amendments, House Freedom Caucus members are starting to think they were wrong ever to go along with the strategy, and they seem committed to taking down the rule votes in the future that block Republican amendments. In other words, they demand free access to the amendment process for them, but it would be okay if you were blocking Democrats. That would be cool, because we're for openness and democracy and stuff like that. Gimmitarians is what they'll be in the end. Don't worry about that. I think that's what's going to start happening pretty soon, Labrador said. Asked whether that was an official position of the HFC and that had been reached during their Tuesday night meeting after votes, Labrador was cagey. That's an intuition, he said, to a chorus of laughs from HFC Chairman Jim Jordan, Republican of actual Ohio, not Idaho that I mistook for Ohio, and HFC board member Mark Meadows, Republican of North Carolina. Another HFC board member, Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina, said the structured rule situation had been a learning process, and he was encouraged that, let's go back to the old pronunciation, GOP leadership would not be blocking any more relevant Republican amendments. Relevant. We'll see about that. Today was very instructive to both sides, Mulvaney said Tuesday night. I guess they sat down and watched I'm Just a Bill on Schoolhouse Rock and figured out this is the way these things work. Yeah, if only we had paid attention to, history. Another HFC member, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, said the decision to support structured rules on appropriations was, quote, a work in progress. There's nothing to say it can't be reeled back if it doesn't work, Perry continued. Well, there is something to say that it can't be reeled back. You might not have the numbers to force it to be reeled back. That's the bottom line. Ryan told the HFC members on the floor that Massey's gun amendments would have sunk the financial services bill. Conservatives pointed out to Ryan that Massey had a similar amendment adopted 2 years ago, which Ryan voted for, and the bill still passed. But Ryan argued in the wake of the Orlando shooting, oh, you mean different circumstances? Wow, we should pay attention to what's actually going on in the country and do things differently based on our sensitivities to actual events in real time? Wow. That's what passes for a moderate position now. Ryan argued that in the wake of the Orlando shooting and with Democrats seizing the House floor over a desire to see certain gun control votes, current events changed it from not a poison pill to a poison pill. That was some really creative phrasing. According to one member present in the floor scrum. Yeah. Ryan was able to sell the Freedom Caucus on supporting the financial services rule by promising to discuss the structured rule issue with them further and by potentially giving Massey a standalone vote in committee on his gun proposals. But the HFC looks apt to vote down the spending bill rule if it does block Republican amendments. That would be a dramatic shift from where the Freedom Caucus was just a few short weeks ago. The group was almost entirely supportive of Ryan's plan, though some expressed concerns, and Representative Justin Amash, whose name pronunciation I have already forgotten, even though we checked it once, Republican of Michigan, actually decided to vote against any structured appropriations rules for a bill that used to be open. I didn't have confidence in it from the beginning, but I think it's fair for people to say they wanted to give Paul a chance, Amash said Tuesday. Of course, Ryan may be saved by the bell. With just 8 legislative days scheduled before the August recess, there won't be many more chances to test whether Republican leadership blocks Republican amendments on appropriations bills. But Labrador doesn't think those bills are the only test. There's a big vote coming up on Speaker. What? There's a big vote coming up on Speaker that is the ultimate rule vote, Labrador said Tuesday night, referring to the January Speaker election. That's not really coming up. But okay, I get you. Contacted for a comment on Laboratory's seeming threat of a coup, Brendan Buck, Ryan's chief communications advisor, shrugged it off. I'll just say I think we're right. All right, Buck said. Well, we'll see. I guess you can never count on retaining your seat when you were you were a compromise candidate to begin with, and you grabbed hold of the seat by insisting that there would be open processes, and then you didn't deliver on them. All right. Well, what can you do? We'll keep an eye on developments over in the House, and that'll probably be a great topic for discussion with Joan McCarter when she returns to our air later on. Also in the congressional happenings, Jennifer Bendry, also at the Huffington Post, as a matter of fact, has this piece. Republican congressman who's leading the probe of the FBI director. Did you catch that? I mean, it's let's see. Did you catch the news? This is something we didn't discuss a great deal yesterday when we were talking about the fallout of FBI Director Comey's press conference, and rather weird one at that, about the e-Ghazi situation for Hillary Clinton. The immediate reaction among Republicans in the House, let's overreach and let's try some of our worst failures and extend them even as we live with the total failure of our Benghazi committee and its investigations, et cetera, et cetera. And remember, of course, the email situation really is it's a stupid sideshow outgrowth of the Benghazi thing. They essentially were unable to pin Benghazi on her, and they hoped that by digging through her records, they would be able to find something stupid on the record that she may have said that would indicate that she really was to blame for it. And so let's see your emails. And then they realized, oh my God, they're on a different server. And then it became, the server itself is the real issue. Very reminiscent of Whitewater. Whitewater is it. The trading in the land at Whitewater is definitely going to yield something. It didn't yield anything, but along the way it yielded, guess what? Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what we were really after. Yeah. A definition of a fishing expedition. Anyway, so the reaction to the announcement by James Comey that there really wasn't enough there to level charges against Hillary Clinton. Surprise, surprise. There was never going to be that. And, of course, the conspiracy-minded among us also believe that even if there was a there wasn't going to be any charges against Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton is involved in Hillary Clinton's affairs, and we don't do that to Hillary Clinton. So as soon as James Comey said there were likely not going to be any charges, they certainly were not going to be recommending any such charges. The Republican response to that is, let's have an investigation of James Comey. So Jennifer Bendry observes this. Looks like the investigation of Comey would fall to Representative Jason Chaffetz, the Republican from Utah, who occasionally makes our news here. He'll be hauling FBI Director James Comey to Capitol Hill on Thursday, that's today, to explain why he didn't recommend criminal charges against Hillary Clinton for using a private email server as Secretary of State. My guess, the reasons will be largely the ones he detailed in a rather extensive press conference just the other day. What he should do is he should get there and just play the tape of it and say, there you go, I already said it. The FBI's recommendation is surprising and confusing, Chaffetz said, who chairs the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. That's why it would fall to him. It's just general oversight and government reform. This could easily have been taken up by another committee, but Chaffetz loves investigating crap. The fact pattern presented by Director Comey makes clear, he says, Secretary Clinton violated the law. Individuals who intentionally skirt the law must be held accountable. The Utah lawmaker argued that while the year-long FBI probe may be over, he's ready to lead a new investigation into that investigation. Congress and the American people have a right to understand the depth and breadth of the FBI's investigation, he said. But it was just last month, before the FBI reached conclusions that Republicans don't like, that Chaffetz was raving about Comey being the most competent, reliable person to lead that Clinton probe. Quote, I do think that in all of government, all of it, this is kind of a non sequitur to that beginning, but I do think that in all of government, he is a man of integrity and honesty, he said of Comey during a June 6th appearance on Fox News' Outnumbered. He, of course, properly phrased that might have read, I think that in all of government he is one of the men of the highest integrity and honesty. But he hedges his terms there. Of all the people who have integrity and honesty, he is definitely one of them, essentially. Of all the people I've met, he's definitely the most recent. That's basically all he has to say here. His finger is on the pulse of this, Chaffetz continued. Nothing happens without him, and I think he is going to be the definitive person to make a determination or a recommendation. Well, he did, and he was, and he made it, and Chaffetz doesn't like it, and now he's going to investigate it. Asked if he thought Republicans would accept an FBI recommendation not to indict Clinton, he replied back then, oh, probably, because we do believe in James Comey. That's where things get really problematic, because, of course, here we are, with exactly that, and guess what? No, we're going to have an investigation. These guys are ridiculous. A Chaffetz spokeswoman did not respond to a request for comment on whether the lawmaker stands by his previous characterization of Comey. He doesn't. Similarly, House Speaker Paul Ryan, who is currently demanding that Comey release his full findings to the public, was praising the FBI director literally hours before he recommended no criminal charges against Clinton. James Comey is a real stand-up guy, Ryan said in a Tuesday radio interview with Charlie Sykes on Wright, Wisconsin. He's the FBI director. That is definitely true. He's got that right. You can't argue with him there. I do believe that his integrity is unequaled. I know U.S. attorneys who serve in Congress who just claim he is such a strong man of integrity. What a strong man. Strong. Republicans are outraged that Comey didn't conclude that Clinton should be prosecuted for using a private email server to transmit sensitive information. At least one lawmaker is accusing him of being steeped in political bias. That despite the fact that Comey is a Republican who served as a deputy attorney general under President George W. Bush. Chaffetz has first-hand experience in compromising sensitive materials, of course. Leave it to the Huffington Post to put it that way. Thank you very much. I appreciated it. In July 2011, the Department of Homeland Security complained to him that the House Transportation Committee, which he chaired at the time, had illegally disclosed sensitive security information to the press. Chaffetz's predecessor on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Representative Darrell Issa of California, also had some mishaps. In October 2012, he put several people's lives in danger when he released State Department documents that compromised the identities of Libyans working with the U.S. government. A few months before that, he published information from a sealed wiretap warrant application in the Congressional Record. That information isn't supposed to be made public without a court's permission, and people who violate that rule can be held in contempt. But weren't, and there's no investigation into why not. So it's all just the same for everybody, equal protection, equal rights under law, yada yada. Right. Never going to happen. Anyway, very interesting. Good notes at the end there. Why wasn't he prosecuted for putting people's lives in danger and violating court orders? Gosh, I couldn't even tell you. Anyway, very interesting note, and thanks to Jennifer Bendry for putting that bit together. Let's see what else I have put aside for catching up on. There really is quite a lot. Let's see. The latest in the Trump retweet of the stupid anti-Semitic meme about Hillary Clinton is, and I guess I really have to find an article on it, but I guess somebody must have shared with him a picture of the packaging for the DVD of the Disney movie Frozen that brags that the package includes 50 free stickers. Very important information. You need to know this. Well, the 50 free stickers are advertised on the packaging, enclosed in what appears to, I guess, any observer, to be a six-pointed star, very much, of course, like that which was described as a Star of David on the anti-Clinton Facebook meme being retweeted by Donald Trump. And he says, well, where's the outrage then against Disney, who used this same shape to, well, and here, I guess, is the rub in case you had any difficulty distinguishing between the two incidents. One said, hey, guess what? There's free stickers inside of Frozen. And, well, I mean, to be fair, everybody knows Hitler loved Frozen, right? So everybody knows, oh, of course they tell you about the 50 stickers inside Frozen in a Jewish star. Wink, wink, Hitler. I don't know. I'm not really sure what. I would have chosen a different shape. I mean, to me, the thing you use for those sorts of things is the multi-pointed starburst thing. Why you would use the six-pointed star, I have no idea. And I guess Greg was saying there really are sheriffs somewhere that use six-pointed stars instead of seven-pointed stars. But, okay, whatever. So sheriffs and Nazis alike love Frozen. It is well known. Clearly can't be anti-Semitic. But as others pointed out, missing from this would be, one, any accusation that anybody was corrupt in accepting the free stickers. 50 free stickers, you're the most corrupt Disney fan ever. Congratulations. And then, of course, the pile of $100 bills. And also maybe say something like, did Disney say, we need to advertise Frozen? Where can we go for imagery that will help Disney fans come to understand that there are 50 free stickers inside here? Oh, I know. Why not a neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic, white supremacist website? Because everybody knows, as I said at the outset, that Nazis love Frozen. So there's almost certainly going to be a prepackaged meme somewhere on, I don't know, say Stormfront, that we could look up and use. I swear the last time I was on Stormfront, everybody was talking about the free stickers in Frozen and how it was really likely the Jews who had kept the number down to 50 rather than Disney's original intent of putting 75 to 100 stickers in there. But cheap Jews prevented them from doing it, and that's why they used the Jewish star, and that's why they're such big fans of Frozen over at Stormfront, and that's why, so that's the missing link here. Did somebody else use a similar shape? Yes. Did that someone find that shape on a neo-Nazi website? No. And I think therein lies all the difference. Anyway, just thought I'd put that out there. And, well, let's pretend it was well worth doing so, and then we can all be happy. All right. Other things that crazy-ass Trump has said in the past couple of days that perhaps deserve some attention. We'll go this direction here because at least it's relatively current. And that is another Trump mouthing off. Where, by the way, are all the moderate Trumps? Why won't they stand up in opposition to these radical Trumpists who are preaching hate and dividing the country and preying on our fears? Where are the moderate Trumps? Well, it isn't Eric. We know that. TPM covers this story, cursing Eric Trump, that is to say, Eric Trump uttering some curse words. Not. This isn't like an interest group for people who want to put a curse on Eric Trump. But we could work on that afterwards. Cursing Eric Trump calls Washington Post reporter over coverage of his dad's donations. We know that Donald Trump is mad about the way David Fairchild is tracking his donations. Now, Eric is mad too, and I guess he called the Washington Post brass and said, what's up with this Fairchild guy? Can't we stick him in a barrel of acid somewhere? Eric Trump reportedly called up the Washington Post on Wednesday. I don't know whether he called the switchboard or whether he has Jeff Bezos' number or what, or maybe the editors. Anyway, he called them up for the purpose, I guess, of profanely ranting at the reporter spearheading coverage of the charitable contributions made, or not made, by his father, Donald Trump. By the way, we were reading the reporting of Sarah Jerde here. Apologies on the last name, Jerde. But the younger Trump, that's Eric, didn't offer any evidence of those donations. I'm just saying, Jesus Christ, why is this guy trying to effing kill us? Trump allegedly told the Post's David Fairchild. He told Fairchild, why is this guy trying to kill us? I mean, I think this guy is supposed to be Fairchild, but all right, maybe he just had some odd phrasing to it. Fairchild had meticulously tried to find corroboration for Donald Trump's claims of generous charitable giving, contacting 200 charities associated with the businessman. You know what the results were. The reporter found only one charity that received a donation in the amount of less than $10,000. Fairchild also went to lengths to reach Trump Jr., reportedly attempting to contact him over email through his foundation and on Twitter. Trump Jr., I think in this case being Eric Trump, not Donald Trump Jr., but maybe he was trying to find Donald. But Eric called him. Trump took issue with the direct messages the reporter left him on Twitter, and for a blog post Fairchild wrote, raising unanswered questions he had about his father's donations. It's disgusting. They love to say things are disgusting. It's disgusting. It's so disgusting what's happening. Eric Trump reportedly told the journalist, I'm saving dying children. We do tremendous good for people, and you're sitting there tearing us apart. Trump alleged that his father had given his own foundation hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, in addition to the donations he had made directly to charities. My father has given me and my foundation hundreds of thousands of dollars. See, I told you he said that. And he's given other charities millions and millions and millions of dollars, Eric Trump said. When Fairchild asked for proof of the gifts, click. Trump told him that he could ask the guys upstairs. Who's that supposed to be? I don't know, but basically, he got any proof? Nope. So, there we go. So, we're back where we started, but I just wanted to let you know that Eric is now in on the action. He's no longer busy with Eric effing Trump's Delicious Ass Wine Company, Incorporated. He's busy defending Dad, as we all knew he would be, and now his own foundation as well. So there we go. Once again, Trump news, but tangential in a way. This one out of Florida, where Attorney General Pam Bondi comes under continuing scrutiny for her role in the suppression of the Trump University investigation. Florida's AG is tied up in the Trump University scandal, and things just got worse, says Emily Atkin over at Think Progress. Things do get worse. Pam's roots are showing in this picture. But, that's not really a legitimate line of criticism here. I'm sure she's a very terrible attorney general in her own right, and I think we should just concentrate on that. Be professional. Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi is in a bit of hot water. And a bit of hot water was, never mind. No, it would have helped, is just what I'm saying. But we can't pay attention to physical appearances here. Even though, whatever. I think that's probably, big in Trump's mind. But we're not Trump. The trouble started in June when the Associated Press reported that Bondi personally solicited a political contribution from Donald Trump in 2013, right around the time she was deciding whether or not to investigate alleged fraud at Trump University. Trump University, of course, is not a university and is controversial for being the for-profit school owned by Donald Trump. She's also the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, but I skipped that part. No, now I haven't skipped that part. Great. Plus, I've wasted more time. Never mind. Moving on. It was only 4 days. I have such terrible dissatisfaction with the way I do this show. It was only 4 days after Bondi announced she might join an investigation into Trump University when a Trump Family Foundation, I wonder which one, gave $25,000 to a political group supporting Bondi's re-election. After that money came in, Bondi said she would not pursue a lawsuit against Trump University. 2 years later, one day before Florida's crucial primary election in crucial Waukesha County, Bondi endorsed Trump for president. Bondi has so far denied impropriety, calling the APA story false and misleading. But the situation is not going away, and calls to investigate Bondi over the donation are piling up. On Wednesday, the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and also Florida, filed 2 complaints against Bondi, one with the Florida Inspector General's office and another with the Florida Commission on Ethics. I didn't even realize they had one. Both complaints request investigations into Bondi, saying more information is needed to see whether Bondi violated Florida ethics laws for public officials. I'm not saying she did it. I'm saying it ought to be looked into. Here's the complaint. It says, misuse of public position. Florida standards of conduct further prohibit a public officer from corruptly using or attempting to use his or her official position or perform his or her official duties to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for himself, herself, or others. If Attorney General Bondi decided not to investigate complaints against Trump University / Trump Institute, or not to join the New York lawsuit, or take similar legal action in order to secure the Trump Foundation's $25,000 contribution to End Justice for All, that's the name of her PAC, she likely misused her public position. The facts remain murky, but if decisions not to investigate Mr. Trump's businesses were linked to Attorney General Bondi's solicitation and acceptance of a $25,000 campaign contribution from the Trump Foundation, she may have violated Florida law and the state's standards of conduct for public officials, Crew Executive Director Noah Bookbinder said in a statement. Crew's requests for investigation are not the first. Since the AP's story broke, the editorial boards of the Orlando Sentinel and the Miami Herald and the Tampa Bay Times have all called for independent investigations of the gift. 3 ethics complaints were also filed against Bondi with the Florida Commission on Ethics, the Florida Elections Commission, and the Florida Bar. Boston attorney J. Whitfield Larrabee, who filed the ethics complaints, is also seeking a federal criminal bribery charge against Bondi, accusing her of taking the money in exchange for ditching the investigation into Trump University. If it looks like a bribe and it quacks like a bribe, I think it's a bribe, Larrabee said. If it quacks at all, I really want to be notified. Alleged bribery aside, there were problems with the donation itself as well. We have covered this. In March, Crew filed a complaint with the IRS over Trump's $25,000 donation to Bondi's group, noting that the money came from the Trump Foundation, a tax-exempt charity. Under federal law, tax-exempt charities are not allowed to make political contributions. The Trump Foundation also apparently failed to list the Bondi donation at all in its filings to the IRS, according to the Washington Post. The Trump Organization issued a rare apology, saying the discrepancies were due to multiple clerical errors. They just happen all the time, multiple places, all at once. But Crew maintained an investigation by the IRS was still needed to determine whether it was really just an honest mistake. It appears Trump University gave an illegal political donation. It was really the Trump Foundation that did it. Told the IRS they didn't give a political donation. Claimed it was made to a similarly named permissible group instead, and now they're saying it's an error. Jordan Leibowitz, a Crew spokesperson, told the Post. Bondi's office did not respond to Think Progress's request for comment on the complaints. In the past, however, she's maintained innocence by saying there just wasn't enough evidence to pursue a case against Trump University, which is currently facing 3 separate lawsuits over alleged fraud. Questions have been raised over that defense as well. Scott Maxwell, a reporter for the Orlando Sentinel, said he trolled through nearly 8,500 pages of public records and found little evidence that Bondi's investigators had actually probed or investigated the complaints that had come her way. Crew's request for an investigation also alleges that Bondi's office received several complaints about Trump University but failed to investigate them. Bondi is not the only state attorney general whose financial relationship with Trump has raised some eyebrows. Greg Abbott, current governor of Texas, former attorney general, has also been accused of taking money from Trump in exchange for dropping an investigation into Trump University. The timeline of that donation, however, is a little different than Bondi's. Abbott dropped his investigation into Trump U in 2010 and received a cumulative $35,000 from Trump in 2013 and 14. Still, a former employee of Abbott said last month that the 2010 investigation should not have been dropped. John Owens, Texas's former deputy chief of consumer protection, said he had developed a strong case against Trump University but was inexplicably ordered to abandon it. It had to be political in my mind, Owens told the AP, because Donald Trump was treated differently than any other similarly situated scam artist in the 16 years I was at the Consumer Protection Office. Like Bondi, Abbott's spokespeople have denied any impropriety. Boy, it is amazing how often people who are running for president or otherwise prominent in American public life don't get charged for things that anybody else would almost certainly find themselves charged for. Okay, very interesting. I, of course, think that there was some real savvy behind the contribution. I think that the Trump Foundation may very well have been fully aware of the fact that their contribution wouldn't have been allowed, and the play here was, let's give her money from the Trump Foundation, and if she gets caught, she'll and have to give it back to us because, one, quid pro quo, so we want to avoid that bribery issue, and two, although who knows whether you can even be caught for bribery anymore thanks to the McDonald case, but two, it was from an illegal source, so she'll end up having to give it back. And what she really can't do, she'll totally hang herself if at this point she says, well, I gave the money back and now I am going to start an investigation into Trump University. That ain't going to happen. So we will get the investigation into Trump University in Florida spiked for free. That's a brilliant play, if that's what's really going on here. Rebecca Romans, of course, points out the very obvious truth that I missed. Trump is sexist. How did I miss that? Trump is sexist because how much did it cost him to get Greg Abbott to spike the investigation? $35,000 in contributions. How much did it cost Trump to get Pam Bondi to spike the Florida investigation? $25,000. Boy, even when they're getting bribed, they get less money. That does seem rather unfair. Oh well, she should sue based on that alone. Where else can we go with things here? We've picked up on that one. There was some chatter yesterday about some of the other crazy, stupid things that Trump was saying in his latest speeches. I know that Kevin Cruz found this one online or commented on it on Twitter, and I guess linking to this Politico story about, it's a Ben Schreckinger filing. Trump goes off on Clinton's email, Obama's plane, and Saddam Hussein. You'll recall that much excitement the other day about Trump saying, even though he had said it before, and why is it news, hey, Saddam Hussein, he was okay, really, when you think about it, because he really killed terrorists. That's why we loved Saddam Hussein. And to be sure, it was why the CIA at one point loved Saddam Hussein. He killed terrorists as defined by their being Iranian, I guess, or Shiites, or Kurds. They were terrorists domestically. But internationally speaking, well, one of the big problems with saying that he killed terrorists is Saddam Hussein financially supported international terrorism and made him a difficult guy to deal with. But it's complicated. I recognize this. Anyway, his other complaint was about Hillary Clinton riding on Air Force One. But as I told you, there are rules about such things, and you can read them if you really want to know who pays. That's the question he posed. Who pays for this? Well, it's an easy answer. You can look at a Congressional Research Service paper and figure that out. But there was another issue wrapped up in all of this rant, and that was this sort of aside that Kevin had made here, and saying Trump, once again, sounds like, he says, what a 6-year-old would say, playing with action figures. There's a portion of the speech during which Donald Trump is, in addition to saying the system's rigged again, because he's in danger of losing something again. So now there's rigging. And Clinton took a bribe, and Loretta Lynch took a bribe when she spoke to Bill Clinton, and that's how we got to this non-indictment on the emails. Then more basic nonsense on pretty much every single topic he touched on, none of which were substantial. But near the end of his speech, Trump, smiling broadly, entertained the crowd, as he always does, with the readout of a hypothetical future phone call with him, the governor, and lieutenant governor of North Carolina, which is, I guess, where he was at the time, state leaders whom he singled out for extensive praise over the course of his remarks. He was, of course, in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time. In this hypothetical call, the state leaders of North Carolina would beg Trump to stop all of America's winning because North Carolina residents were so sick of it. In response, Trump said he would have to decline, regretfully informing the pair that he would keep America on its winning ways. I thought Kevin did a fun job of summarizing that one. Hello, President Trump. This is Governor Awesome from North Carolina. We just got to stop all this winning we're doing. Can't you do something about that? People are just so tired of it. No way, man. I'm the bestest president ever. Pew, pew, pew. And we're just going to keep on winning. It really, I thought he hit the nail on the head there. It does. It sounds like a 6-year-old playing with action figures. Hello, President Woody. This is Governor Buzz Lightyear calling to say you're just amazing, my good buddy. Anyway, just glad we got a chance to get that one onto the record. All right, let's see. We were early in the show, as I said, forewarned that we wouldn't have Greg with us today, but he said, remember, you can always turn to our abbreviated pundit roundup for all the news of the day. So let's do it at the end of the show, the close of the show, instead of the beginning here. As I scroll down what's happening on the front page of Daily Kos, I see Mark Sumner picking up the Donald Trump hides behind the skirt of a Disney princess and finds himself frozen out. Get it? It's a questionable move. I'm curious as to why the Disney designers would choose to go with a 6-pointed starburst to tell us about the 50 stickers. But hey, whatever. Hillary Clinton, of course, retweeting Donald Trump's crazy, stupid thing about Frozen by asking, do you want to build a straw man? Let's all get together on that one. Let's see. Always fun, Ruben Bowling with a Tom the Dancing Bug cartoon out there on the front page. And guess what? Donald Trump featured prominently. It's all about him. We got the Morning Digest. Republicans dust off an old favorite to attack Democratic Senate hopefuls. Obamacare. How fantastic. And let's see. We'll just keep on going down here before We got to scroll a little bit to get to, I can't stop on every one of these stories. I'll never make it down to, Cheers and Jeers. Dang, I could spend some time there. Bill wouldn't mind that at all, I would think. Let's see. Where's our abbreviated pundit roundup? There we are. Very next thing, scandal. Scandal in quotes, and scandals. What an interesting title. Thanks very much for that one, Greg. Okay, let's see. Some charts, consistently higher ratings for Obama than Bush in Europe. Where did that come from? Okay, part of the bigger picture of Obama campaigning for Clinton. Okay, fantastic. Jonathan Ladd, political scientist. No axe to grind. Let's see what he has to say about this one here. Although this follows the tweet here. Clinton and Sanders camps are in talks for a joint appearance, possibly next week in New Hampshire, reports Jeff Zeleny, but it's not set in stone yet. Set in stone, granite, New Hampshire. Get it? I don't know. Jonathan Ladd, political scientist, says first, Zoller argues, who are we talking about? I don't know, that media negativity follows a rule of anticipated importance in which a politician receives media scrutiny in proportion to his or her own future importance in American politics. Oh, interesting. Second, Zoller claims that media negativity follows a rule of product substitution. Journalists resist politicians' efforts to control their coverage. Since the 1990s, the Clintons have been caught in a cycle of escalation with the political press. The press investigates some possible wrongdoing of the Clintons. The Clintons perceive the investigation to be grossly unfair, and in response, stonewall and restrict press access. The press sees this obstruction as suspicious and investigates harder. The Clintons stonewall harder, the press investigates harder, and the cycle continues. Some politicians in similar circumstances find out how counterproductive the whole thing is and de-escalate, but not the Clintons. Since the amount of coverage is driven by this arms race, not the offense that started it all, it's not surprising that when these investigations finally end, we often discover that the original wrongdoing is disappointingly trivial. It's an interesting point. Third, the social dynamics. I guess that was supposed to be second. I don't know what's first. The social dynamics of the D.C. press corps likely play some role, although I suspect the effect is smaller than for the first two factors. The D.C. press corps is a social system which has evolving social norms. For whatever reason, early after Bill Clinton was elected, a social norm developed where attacks on the Clintons, especially deep dives into their personal lives and psyches, were acceptable or even encouraged, even more than for Obama and the Bushes. I don't want to overstate things because I think the rule of anticipated importance and the rule of product substitution are the main factors, but it could be that once the pattern of conflict with the Clintons was in place, social norms among the D.C. press exacerbated the hostile dynamic and made it harder to break out of. From the beginning, a segment of the D.C. elite media viewed the Clintons as low-class hicks. That's certainly true, I remember that. The opposite of how the elite press viewed John F. Kennedy. Pillar of the D.C. media establishment, David Broder, epitomized this sentiment when he famously said during the Lewinsky scandal, Bill Clinton came in here and he trashed the place and it's not his place. Some form of this dynamic has persisted. You can see it in the special relish with which major D.C. reporters have gone after Hillary in the wake of the email scandal. And he provides 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 such examples. Josh Marshall, a quote here from March 2015, still very relevant, he says, clearly this no drama Obama is characterological. Blah, 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 blah. It stems directly from the people involved and what they generate around them. I don't mean this as a character issue, as the press is likely to put it, but people are just different. They live in the world differently. That's true. They have different patterns which they generate and perpetuate again and again in different contexts. I have my own theory, says Josh, about this with Obama. Whether it was chicken or egg, the first black president of the Harvard Law Review and the first black president of the United States was never going to be someone who was governed by impulse and intuition. It was going to be someone controlled, careful, deeply considered in his decisions. Obama would never, never would have gotten where he got, basically, gotten where he did, if he was not also capable of being daring and bold, but bold and daring after giving the available options a good deal of thought. I don't know if Obama was born that way or whether he shaped himself into that person, but the role, the job, was going to select for it. I have little question. That is, needless to say, not Bill Clinton. But it's not just Monica and all the other Clinton baggage. It's also a lot of the political genius, the effortless magic as a public speaker, his ability to charm and connect emotionally with people of so many different kinds, from so many different backgrounds. This is the thing with Bill Clinton, which I suspect anyone who has watched him closely over the years will grasp, that his political genius and skills are inseparable from his crushing flaws. If you were around in the 90s, you've seen this movie before. The Clintons are great, but there's always something. Always a dance, always drama. It's just inseparable from who they are. CDS, Clinton Derangement Syndrome, Greg continues, was and maybe is a thing. Funny thing is, it's not Bill that's running. Sometimes when people in institutions overreach, it's worth reminding ourselves. In any case, the press has a pattern to run. It's well laid out in the two pieces above. Then, some Eric Boehlert tweets. Gee, look who's completely left out of the email controversy this week. Loretta Lynch, which is exactly what Dems wanted. Dems get to watch while GOP wages war on the FBI's GOP director. Funny how that worked out. Greg comments, hard to imagine that a day's worth of preparation, Comey is testifying today, is going to turn out any better for Republicans than years and millions of dollars worth of planning did in the Benghazi hearings. Then again, Republicans have anger and CDS issues to work out, and it looks like they are choosing to do so in public, setting themselves up for more anger and CDS down the road. Voters know it. It's why it never seems to win elections. Hey, at least it's good for Fox and talk radios, bottom line. And that would be an interesting angle for congressional elections to exploit, if you ask me. I mean, there will be people who are craving it, of course, and think of it as a do-over, and those people are Republicans and aren't winnable votes, but it might be worth pointing out to people that the more Republicans you send to Congress, the greater the chances and the longer these things will last. If you loved the era of endless, politically driven Republican investigations into everything, if you loved the 90s and the way they went after Bill Clinton, and you loved the last 8 years, the way they constantly said Obama was a tyrant and a Hitler and we're going to repeal this and repeal that and investigate this and investigate that and impeach. If you need more, I guess, vote Republican. If you were not lying when you said you were sick of it in 1997 and 1998 and 2000 and 2008 and 2012 and just yesterday, if you've really had enough of that, the only way to tamp down this, this only happens with a Republican majority in Congress. It just stops happening with a Democratic majority. You may not be able to turn everything around in both houses, but you can do your part to the extent that it depends on a majority, and a majority with a margin to work with, and a majority that hasn't been delivered, at the very least, an electoral scare based on America's expressed sickness with this idiotic derangement syndrome that Republicans insist on perpetuating. Well, if you at least deliver them the scare and say, okay, fine, here you have the majority, but you got 220 seats, not much margin to play with. You're going to find people in I don't know if there are any swing districts left, but you're going to find people concerned with overreaching. And there's only one way to deliver that message, and that's by sending Democrats to Congress. I mean, that's all there is to it. So let's see if they can work that way. All right, on to the New York Times for the last couple minutes of our roundup. His bold here. Let's see. Donald J. Trump on Wednesday offered a defiant defense of his campaign's decision to publish an image widely viewed as anti-Semitic, back to the Star, saying he regretted deleting it, and vigorously reaffirmed his praise of Saddam Hussein, the murderous Iraqi dictator. Very popular position to take among Republicans, who still insist that the Iraq War was a great idea. In the span of 30 minutes, and often shouting Mr. Trump, remember when just one shout would kill you if you were a Democrat, breathed new life into a controversy that was sparked on Saturday by his posting of an image on his Twitter account of a six-pointed star next to a picture of Hillary Clinton, with money seeming to rain down in the background. The image was quickly and broadly criticized for invoking stereotypes of Jews. Mr. Trump deleted it 2 hours later and replaced the star with a circle. "Yeah, shouldn't have taken it down," Mr. Trump recalled telling one of his campaign workers. "I said, too bad, you should have left it up. I would have rather have defended it. That's just a star," Mr. Trump said repeatedly to a pre-selected crowd full of people that actually work for him and or agree with him. The bold that Greg was talking about, it was a striking display of self-sabotage from a presumptive presidential nominee and underscored the limitations of Mr. Trump's scattershot approach during the Republican primaries, not to mention how difficult it often makes it for his campaign team to control him. Trump talked more about Chuck Todd, Saddam, mosquitoes, his Jewish friends, and his anti-Semitic tweet than Clinton. It was a bizarre and ineffective response to Clinton's clubbing of his New Jersey business practices, the casinos business practices today after the FBI report. Who could have predicted it? And then, of course, his new tweet with the frozen thing. Greg says, "I say again, he's not a normal candidate. Don't treat him as one. Don't prop him up just because he's the presumptive GOP nominee and we are supposed to. Don't wait to pivot. He has no idea what he's doing. He's not fit to be president. It's clear to anyone watching, even to Republicans, even to Paul Ryan. Poor guy." And we have this tweet to prove it, I guess. Adam Serviansky tweeting, "I like that some people are more outraged by Trump missing a political opportunity than by his defense of using anti-Semitic propaganda." Brian Fallon, State Department spokesman Kirby, just now says 2 emails that Comey said were marked classified were wrongly marked and were not classified. And I guess we're transitioning back over to that there. Nick Merrill, here are the 2 emails. Condolence calls, simply marked wrong. Interesting. So, she put classified material at risk. Well, it didn't end up at risk and shouldn't have been classified in the first place. Then lots of collections of the covers of the Chilcot investigation in the UK regarding the run-up to the Iraq War, about which we have yet said nothing. We'll have to put some time aside for that one tomorrow. But guess what? They reached most of the conclusions that the rest of us had reached too, plus covered some butts along the way as well. Greg Sargent, next up in the abbreviated pundit roundup. Republicans are wringing their hands this morning. Donald Trump was already blowing what should have been a sterling opportunity to fatally damage Hillary Clinton. FBI Director James Comey's announcements recommended against criminal charges, but it also strongly criticized Clinton in ways that undercut her self-defense on the emails and her broader argument for the presidency. And the New York Times reports that Republicans worry that Trump's lack of discipline is already undercutting their chances of capitalizing on it. Yeah, that's a very interesting angle on this, too. He was handed this opportunity to beat up on Clinton over a very, very soft spot, and instead he spent the time swinging back about the star, about which almost nobody cares. But that one is personally, he sees as being personally damaging to him, and he'd rather take care of personal business than the business of winning the election, which of course isn't really available to him. So maybe I guess you could argue, well, we know that's a lost cause, so I might as well score some punches on Clinton over something else. Anyway, the New York Times reports Republicans are worried about this, but allow me, Greg Sargent, that is, to suggest another possibility. If Clinton does manage to get through this mess relatively unscathed, perhaps the Republican Party more broadly, and not just Donald Trump, will be appropriately seen as a culprit. Perhaps the conduct of Republicans overall, both in previous efforts to target Clinton, such as over Benghazi, and now in this one, could get priced into the public's reaction. Democratic strategist Bob Shrum predicts the Republicans will overreach once again on the emails. I think it will go about as well as the Republicans did on Whitewater or Benghazi or anything else. I just think it's fundamentally over. I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that Clinton, whose trust numbers are dismal, could sustain further damage, but Republican overreach now looks like a very real possibility. Now they're saying they're going to investigate Comey as well. If so, the problem here isn't necessarily just Trump. It's the broader GOP willingness to play these games to rally the base. And it's possible this will be priced into the broader public reaction to GOP criticism of Clinton over the emails, perhaps helping mitigate what could otherwise be more damaging. I guess that's another angle on the same sort of point I was making, which really is that it's a good opportunity for Democrats running for Congress to say, you've made up your mind on what to do about Trump. I understand that. But you're still thinking of voting for Republicans for Congress. It's not Trump. It's certainly not solely Trump that does this. Remember, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago where everybody said, oh my God, look what Trump is. He's so reckless about the Brexit thing. We can't stand it. We can't have this guy as president. Well, okay, fine. You don't want him as president because he's fiscally reckless? Don't forget that well before Trump ever really emerged as the leading candidate, the rest of the Republican Party was actually out there advocating defaulting on the federal debt. And, it's going to be a good thing for the economy. It's going to work out fantastic. You should be thanking us for threatening the integrity of the federal debt and our willingness to pay bondholders. I mean, it's thoroughgoing to the party. It's not Trump. Get rid of Trump, you still have people saying they're going to default on the federal debt. So it's no good to just focus on him. It doesn't do you any good. Likewise, sure, you've made up your mind not to vote for Trump, but will you be voting for these people who are literally proposing spending the next presidential administration pursuing dead-end leads in things that just have nothing to them, and they're going to press every single angle, and if they can't get the result they want, they're going to investigate the guy who didn't give them the result that they wanted. I guess you're really going to have to face up to all this. So there's plenty more in today's Pundit Roundup, which I guess isn't all that abbreviated now that I think about it, because wow. What about the story I missed today? Well, here's the top story that I missed so far today. I set it aside. Maybe we'll treat it on Friday. What about Gretchen Carlson suing Roger Ailes for sexual harassment? That's pretty interesting. And guess what? There's a paper trail there that actually spells out some activity that's just, well, I don't know. Surprising? Maybe. I don't know. I guess it's surprising in that, have you seen Roger Ailes? Anyway, comes right down to it. He just basically says, hey, you and I should have some sex. What do you think? Then your career would go a little bit better. That's pretty blatant. But, hey, he tells it like it is. Maybe. Although I don't know that her career would have gone any better. Anyway, what else did I miss today? That's the job of the guys on the after show. And it's Thursday. And that means, thank God, it's Joe Vidi version of the after show. Anti-government kooks. What? Really? Are laughed out of a county meeting after trying to arrest the commissioners for doing their jobs. That is funny. A report by the ACLU reveals that federal officials have been complicit in the deportation of U.S. veterans. And a cancer drug discovered by UCLA sets off a multi-billion-dollar takeover fight among biotech firms. Who would have guessed?
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about this one for the last half? They'll be reporting on the Michigan Supreme Court ruling against the man suing Pandora for revealing his musical tastes. Thanks. A little weird, though. And the ruthless investor capitalist Brian R. Burke, known for preying on the vulnerable, is destroyed in court by a homeless math whiz. All of that coming up next on the After Show with Wink and Justice.